Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to kind of shift gears a bit today. We're going to dive into something pretty heavy, nihilism.
Oh yeah, nihilism. That's a deep one for sure.
It is. It is. And by the end of this deep dive, you'll not only know what it is, but also all the different forms it takes and how it's, evolved over time. You might even be surprised at why some people actually find it appealing.
Yeah, it definitely makes me rethink things, that's for sure.
It does, it does. And to guide us through all this, we're using this YouTube video from Philonautica called Why Are We Here? The Nihilistic Truth. So what is nihilism exactly?
Well, the word itself comes from the Latin nil, which means nothing, and that kind of gets at the heart of it.
Right, straight to the point.
Yeah, it's the belief that life, at its core, has no inherent meaning, no grand plan, no ultimate purpose. There's no real value in existing.
So we're just kind of, like cosmic accidents?
Basically, yeah. From the nihilist perspective, we're just temporary blips on the radar. Kind of like that line from the video that just says, the point is, there ain't no point. It's bleak, but gets the message across, I guess.
It does, it does. Nihilism challenges all those narratives we kind of hold on to, like religion, societal values, even the idea of inherent human goodness.
All those things we think give life meaning.
Exactly. For a nihilist, those are just stories, stories we tell ourselves to make sense of a universe that's ultimately chaotic and indifferent.
So it's like, if I'm picturing this right, the universe is this massive cold expanse, and we humans are just tiny fleeting sparks and all that.
Yeah, that's a really good way to visualize it. Yeah. Now, this idea isn't new. The term nihilism popped up in the 19th century, originally used by a philosopher named Friedrich Jacobi to critique other philosophies that were popular at the time.
But it was that novel, Fathers and Sons, by Ivan Turgenev, right? That's when nihilism really started reaching a wider audience, especially in Russia.
That's right, that's right. And in Russia, things got interesting. Nihilism became entangled with these radical social and political movements.
So we're talking about rejecting authority.
Exactly. The state, the church, even family structures, anything that was seen as hindering individual freedom.
Wow. So some pretty extreme views.
Definitely. Some groups took it really like advocating for revolution, even terrorism in some cases.
It's amazing how a philosophical idea can spark such real-world events.
Yeah, pretty powerful.
And speaking of powerful thinkers, can we talk about Friedrich Nietzsche? He's famous for saying God is dead. Seems pretty closely linked to nihilism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's important to understand, Nietzsche wasn't being literal. He was actually commenting on the decline of traditional religious values in the West.
So not about an actual death, but more like a fading away.
Exactly. For centuries, religion gave people this framework for meaning and purpose. But as society became more secular, focused on reason, that framework started to fall apart.
So it was like freedom from those old dogmas, but also this potential void of meaning.
Right. It's like a double-edged sword. Did Nietzsche think it would lead to despair?
Well, he did worry about that, the potential for despair when there's no external source of meaning.
He did, but he also saw a different possibility. He believed that humans could overcome this, become what he called Ubermensch.
Ubermensch, what does that mean?
It's basically individuals who create their own values, forge their own paths, unbound by, conventional morality.
So like self-made meaning, even though there's no inherent meaning?
Exactly. It's like Nietzsche saw nihilism as this necessary destruction that could clear the way for something new, potentially even greater.
Okay, I'm kind of starting to see where he's coming from, but what would that even look like, creating your own value?
Imagine you've always been told what's right, what's wrong, what's important. Then suddenly you realize those are just rules made by other people. So you start to question everything, examine your beliefs, and try to figure out what really matters.
Like a total reevaluation of your whole worldview.
Yeah, it can be pretty intense. Maybe you decide that experiences are more important than material possessions, or that kindness is more valuable than ambition. You might even reject the whole idea of a successful life and define success on your own terms.
It sounds both kind of scary and liberating at the same time.
It can be both, definitely.
Yeah.
And that's just one example. The point is there's no one right answer. It's about individual exploration and self-discovery. Nietzsche actually thought that Christianity, with its emphasis on truth, kind of contributed to its own decline. The search for truth led people to question the very foundations of their faith.
Oh, that's interesting. So before we get too far ahead, we should remember that nihilism isn't just this one big monolithic thing, right? It's got different forms, different flavors.
A nihilism buffet.
Yeah, like a buffet, right? You've got your existential nihilism, maybe some cosmic nihilism on the side. Let's start with existential nihilism, since that seems to be the one everyone talks about.
Okay, sure. So existential nihilism really comes down to this. Life has no inherent meaning. We're free to create our own purpose, but ultimately our choices don't have some preordained cosmic significance.
Okay, I think I'm following. But how's that different from existential? They both seem pretty bleak.
Yeah, it's subtle but important. Let's say you have to make a big life decision, like changing careers or moving to a new city. The existential nihilist might say, what's the point? It's all going to end the same anyway. But the existentialist, even though they know there's no set path, they might say, I can choose what matters to me and make this change meaningful. They see possibility, not just emptiness.
Oh, okay. So it's about how you approach those choices, even though there's no inherent meaning.
Exactly. And that makes all the difference.
All right, that makes sense. So what about cosmic nihilism? Where does that fit in on our nihilism buffet?
Cosmic nihilism takes a wider view. It focuses on how vast and indifferent the universe really is. Billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars, and our planet is just a speck of dust.
It's like that pale blue dot photo of Earth. It really shows you how tiny we are.
Exactly. And if the universe doesn't even notice we're here, then do our values, our struggles, really matter? That's what the cosmic nihilist wrestles.
It's pretty humbling, if not a little terrifying.
It can be, yeah. It definitely makes you reevaluate things.
Okay, so we've got existential nihilism and cosmic nihilism. What other flavors are there on this buffet?
Welcome back to our nihilism deep dive. What are your thoughts so far? Any of these ideas kind of hitting home?
It's a lot to process, that's for sure. We've talked about how nihilism challenges those basic ideas we have about meaning and purpose, right? And how it can lead to some pretty radical conclusions about, like, individual freedom and society.
Yeah, and we're just getting started.
Right. And remember that Philanautica video? It doesn't just define nihilism, it really digs into some of the implications.
It does.
Like, what if we actually accept that nothing inherently matters? What does that even mean for, how we live our lives? Does it just lead to despair?
That's the big question, right? And it's interesting because the video actually talks about how embracing that nothingness, that void, can actually be freeing.
Freeing?
Especially for someone who's hit rock bottom. It removes the pressure of constantly searching for meaning, for achieving something.
So like finding freedom by giving up.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that idea of amor fati that Nietzsche talks about, which means love of fate.
Love of fate?
Yeah. It's about accepting everything, the good and bad, without judgment or resistance.
So basically saying, okay, universe, you win. I'm just along for the ride now.
Exactly. And that can be surprisingly powerful, especially when you're dealing with suffering or hard time. It's about letting go of control and finding peace amidst all the chaos.
I can see that. But honestly, that's not going to be for everyone, right? For a lot of people, a meaningless existence is just too much to handle.
Of course, nihilism isn't for everyone.
Yeah.
It's a tough philosophy. You need a certain level of, intellectual and emotional maturity to really grapple with.
Even if you find it intellectually interesting, there's still that emotional side. It's one thing to think, okay, maybe life has no meaning, but to actually live with that idea every day.
Right, that's the challenge. And the video touches on this. It talks about finding those little things, even if they don't fit into society's definition of a meaningful life.
It uses the example of someone finding peace in everyday experiences, even if they're not, profound or anything.
Yeah, exactly. Like spending time in nature, nurturing close relationships, pursuing some creative passion, or even just finding joy in those ordinary moments.
So it's like meaning isn't something you find, it's something you create through your actions.
Exactly. And it's always evolving. What gives you meaning today might not tomorrow. It's about staying open to new experiences, staying curious.
Always searching for those things that give you purpose.
Yeah. But nihilism isn't just about individual meaning. It also affects how we view society and our place in it. Remember, we talked about political nihilism earlier.
Right, that distrust of institutions.
And that can show up in a lot of ways. Some people might totally withdraw from politics, thinking it's all pointless.
Like, why bother?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Others might go the opposite way, become radical activists trying to tear down the whole system.
And then there are those who might use nihilism to justify, like apathy or even bad behavior, thinking nothing matters, so who cares?
That's dangerous. It's important to remember that nihilism doesn't mean anything goes. Even if there are no objective moral truths, we still live in a society with shared values and consequences.
So how do we balance that nihilistic view with the need for, social order and ethical behavior?
Not an easy question. But one way is to recognize that even if life is meaningless, we still have a responsibility to treat each other with compassion and respect.
We're all in this together. Right?
Exactly. And even if there's no grand cosmic purpose, we can still create meaning and purpose in our own lives and our communities.
Trying to make the world a little better.
Even if our efforts are ultimately fleeting. It's finding that balance between acknowledging the void and choosing to act in ways that, align with our values, however we define them.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about nihilism and art? Does a meaningless life mean art is meaningless too?
That's a question that artists and writers have been grappling with forever.
Like that Shakespeare quote, right? Art can definitely express that nihilism, that feeling of futility.
Absolutely. But it can also be a way to push back against that void, to create beauty and meaning in a world that seems to lack it.
Like with abstract expressionism, where artists reject traditional ideas of meaning and embrace chaos.
It's like they're saying, I'm not trying to explain this world. I'm just expressing my experience of it. And in that act of creation, they find meaning.
And this isn't just visual art. Literature, music, film, they can all explore nihilistic themes.
It's about using creativity to confront the void, to find meaning in the midst of all that meaning.
So nihilism, even though it seems bleak, can actually be a source of creativity, right?
Yeah, it pushes us to understand the human condition in a deeper way.
It makes us confront uncomfortable truth, but it also opens up possibilities for freedom and self-creation.
It's challenging, no doubt, but it encourages us to live authentically and create our own meaning in a world that might not offer any inherent purpose.
So we've covered a lot, from the history of nihilism and its potential downsides to its surprising appeal and different interpretations.
But there's one more piece to this puzzle, the idea of active nihilism.
Active nihilism, what's that?
It's a pretty interesting twist. It's not about being passive or resigned.
Okay, stay tuned, everyone, because we're going even deeper into nihilism in our final segment. Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into the final part of our exploration of nihilism. We've talked about that void, the lack of inherent meaning, and all those different flavors of nihilism. But now things get even more interesting because we're going to tackle active nihilism.
Yeah, it definitely adds a new layer to this whole philosophy, especially since people usually connect nihilism with, just giving up.
I know, right? The term active nihilism sounds kind of like a contradiction. Isn't nihilism all about accepting that nothing really matters? How can you be active about that?
That's what makes it so interesting. Active nihilism isn't about just accepting that void. It's about seeing it as a challenge to create your own values and purpose.
So instead of despair, we get empowerment.
Exactly. It's like saying, okay, universe, you're not going to give me the answer, so I'm going to make my own.
That's a pretty bold move, but how do you actually do that? How does active nihilism work in real life?
Remember Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch? That's a perfect example. The Übermensch doesn't just accept that, God is dead and there's no objective morality. They use it as fuel to go beyond those limits and create their own values.
So it's about taking charge of your life, even when the universe doesn't give you a roadmap.
Exactly. Active nihilism is about embracing the freedom that comes from realizing there's no set path, no cosmic plan. It's about saying, I'm writing my own story, and I'm going to make it a good one, even if it's all happening in this void.
I can see how that could be appealing, turning nihilism into a source of motivation and creativity.
Right. And it can play out in a bunch of ways. Some people might chase their passions with everything they've got, knowing that they're the ones creating meaning.
Others might focus on kindness and compassion, making a difference in a world that can feel pretty indifferent.
Or it could even be about challenging the way things are, fighting for justice, or working to make a better world for future generations.
So it's less about apathy and more about taking action, even if you know those values are ultimately your own creation.
Exactly. It's about taking on that responsibility that comes with freedom. We have the power to shape our lives and the world around us, even without a grand plan.
This whole idea of active nihilism has really given me a new perspective on all of this.
It makes you question what meaning and purpose really are, right?
It does, and maybe that's the biggest takeaway from our deep dive into nihilism. It's not about surrendering to despair or just giving up. It's about understanding the freedom we have to create our own meaning, to live authentically, and to make the most of this, amazing experience we call life.
It's about acknowledging the void, but not letting it control you. Instead, you use it as a starting point to create something meaningful, even if it doesn't last forever.
That's a powerful thought to end on. We've covered a lot today, but this isn't the end of the journey. Think about what resonated with you. What questions popped up for you? Does nihilism have anything to offer your life?
Keep exploring those questions. Keep searching for your own answers. And most importantly, keep living a life that feels true to you.
That's it for our deep dive into nihilism. We hope you've enjoyed exploring this complex and, sometimes challenging philosophy with us. Until next time, keep questioning, keep discovering, and keep diving deep.